Sometimes a game comes across your path and it seems like it will either be too big or just not a great fit for your preferences. For me, one of the bigger games this year that looked that way was Kingdom Come Deliverance II. And a huge thank you to the developers for sending me a code, especially so early before the game comes out. But after 7 hours with the game, I came to a conclusion. Freedom comes at a cost. Kingdom Come Deliverance II offers an almost daunting amount of depth and choice and possibility within virtually every system that they have built. From the dialogue choices, to perks and skills, to the open world, to just the basic principle of cause and effect, everything you do causes what feels like tiny ripples that can crash and make landfall as a consequence much later. And as someone who typically shies away from games with this style of combat and also with this level of density and playtime, I wanted to give this game a fair shot. I took my time, I listened to dialogue, I carefully read tutorial messages, I weighed and considered my options when a choice was presented to me, and I did my best to figure out the various systems and the combat. And hopefully, everything I've learned and experienced can help you decide whether or not to jump into the franchise for the first time or decide to sit this one out. Now, as always, if you like this kind of content, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And first, we're going to talk about the story and the dialogue. If there is something that will be made abundantly clear to anyone diving into this game, it's that great care was put into the characters and the story. The opening of the game has some questionable pacing, with sort of an awkward sequence where you simply run from point to point using a crossbow, and then you fight a few enemies in this sort of cramped area on a wall top with your sword. And I didn't record this because it felt like it was going to be a tutorial, and then it kind of wasn't. It was just setting up the story. The game doesn't really start until you're on a horseback and you're setting off on your very first mission. And this is where you get the first taste of costly freedom coming into play. The persuasion system is pretty straightforward, and like most RPGs, you have ways of improving this as time goes on. But the choices are actually meaningful. These are not throwaway statements like in some games. You could be rude or friendly and then you largely land with the same result. One such instance landed us in the stocks, and I'll talk about that later. Rather than attempt to calm things down, you can be aggressive with an NPC. It can lead to fights. It can lead to arrests. And while these things are happening, they will make references to choices that you have already made. So your choices are very real. They don't just sort of dedicate how a quest will go or how it will turn out. That's not all it's doing. It becomes part of the story itself. But as I said, freedom comes at a cost. This can lead to frustration or results that you find irritating, or it even feels like sometimes it is wasting your time. I'm going to touch a little bit more on time wasting when I discuss the open world in a moment. And before I do, I want to say that the story and the characters are quite good, but be prepared to have lengthy segments of dialogue or just sort of watching scenes play out. Multiple times during my play sessions, my wife would look up from reading her book and she would just sort of watch what was happening. It honestly felt like a TV show at times, and not in a bad way. Just be warned, there will be large portions of your play sessions potentially gobbled up by dialogue and story. While my preference is to have a game be a little bit more sparing with these sections, I will say it was done at a quality that made me enjoy the banter and the character building. I also appreciated the great care taken to add a lot of density and a lot of quality to even just NPC interactions. They will say a lot. They will give you a lot of clues. Just asking about a surrounding location can result in little waypoints on your map for you to go and investigate, which again harkens back to all that costly freedom. You can spend large segments of time just talking to NPCs and listening for clues or info or things to go and find, or you can just skip through all that and be more quest-oriented. I think the players that take their time and soak the story and the dialogue elements in will have a much better time. And with interviews indicating that this game has somewhere between 80 and 100 hours of gameplay, after only 7 hours of my own experience, I can see why there's that much inside this game. So if the story and the dialogue set a stage for a lot of freedom and a lot of choice, the open world does this to an even greater degree. This is where things can start to go awry for you, because it really did for me. And at this point, I have to be a little critical for how saving works in this game. And yes, I'm known for not reading tutorials and info, but this time I was painstakingly paying attention, and the saving system was just not explained very well. And I think that it should be, because it can lead to big frustration. Experienced players probably know all about this, but if you don't, it can be a huge time loss. The game is saved in a handful of ways. If you sleep in your own bed, if you interact with an NPC and it updates your quest with something new to do, or if you have a save potion in your inventory called Save Your Schnapps, which I guess is supposed to be like a drink, you can just go to the menu and save it. Now, they are kind enough to give you the recipe for this save drink, but one of the ingredients was seemingly nowhere to be found. I found plenty of nettle, but the belladonna was literally nowhere. It got to the point where I just bought some, and I figured all of this out very painfully. I spent probably 45 minutes to an hour exploring the first town, picking plants, I was talking to people, and then I decided, let me set out on this first quest. And I got jumped by a pack of wolves, and I died. Now, since I hadn't saved it, I lost all of that progress, roughly an hour, and this creates an awkward tension point, in my opinion. I managed to scrape together enough coin to get that ingredient that after 7 hours I just have not found in the wild, and the potion making, or the apothecary, is actually a fun and satisfying little minigame, but it's very involved, and one mistake can waste your precious resources. You can literally ruin a recipe. Well, by now I'm pretty good at making the save potions, so I timed myself. It takes approximately 2 minutes to make one potion when you know what you're doing, and you just seamlessly go through all the steps. So the open world ends up sort of looming over you like this threatening shadow. Do I want to roam the countryside or the woods? Going out and just looking for things? Well, I better save it before I do, but saving requires a potion or my own bed, and the potion is a bit of a time sink anytime you want to make some. Now, I'm assuming that this pain point fades a bit with time. I'm assuming you'll just regularly be able to buy the Save Your Schnapps from the shops, and then you will also maybe have more coin to buy a bed or a place to stay, and that would then lead to this not being so painful. But it makes the wide open feeling of the game just as things are getting started, well, it feels rather uninviting and overly punishing. As I said, freedom comes at a cost. You could spend an entire play session scrounging for coin by killing wildlife and then quickly sell it because it's considered stolen and belongs to the king, and then you could use that coin to make or buy plenty of the save potions. And then you could go wherever you want and sort of do whatever you want. But that's a costly endeavor with respect to your time, and this is something you need to know before going in, or you'll simply get frustrated and waste large chunks of your play session. So the story, the dialogue, the open world, they offer a lot of depth and freedom that can really be costly, but so does the RPG side of the game as well. When it comes to the RPG elements of this game, you will be very pleased if you want a lot of depth and a lot of choice. I would say that my general consensus after my time with this game is that cause and effect is a huge and real part of what went into the RPG systems. There are perks and skills for weapon types, for your reputation, for repairing your gear, and then your basic stat categories like strength and vitality, well, they have perks within them also. And then you have the persuasion system affecting story and quest outcomes, the potion making having a tactile feel where each part's going into the potion, and that allows you to also make mistakes and mess things up. There is a litany of choices with your gear and how to outfit yourself. Let me just give you an example of how the cause and effect of the RPG experience can play out. As the early parts of the story set things up, it led to choices that felt very genuine. We needed to make money, and we needed to figure out where to go next. Well, my choices led to me having to carry some sacks of grain by myself. My companion did not want to help. So while he was sitting and resting, he got into an argument. Now, I could have helped make the peace and maybe smooth things over, but I decided to back him up. And it led to a fight, which led to an arrest, which led to us being put in the stocks. And I'll be honest, it just felt so genuine, like a real outcome from choices and actions that I had taken. And he kept referencing things that I had chosen to do before, all the way back to the beginning. This might be the first RPG I played where choices have very tangible and long-lasting impact. Now, it could all be a mirage. Maybe no matter what happened, we would have ended up in those stocks. But even if it is an illusion, they do a pretty darn good job of selling that illusion. And that leaves one major area of the game that I was the most concerned about enjoying, and that is the combat. Admittedly, I have never been a fan of first-person melee combat like this, and after 7 hours with this game, I would not say that my opinion has changed much. I would attribute some of this to how the game sets it up and spaces it out, but also, hitboxes on animals in particular are pretty terrible, which is partly why I died to the wolves. My wife particularly enjoyed watching that happen, and even as entertaining as it was, she said that it looked like I was clumsily swinging above them rather than effectively swinging at them. So what is it about the way they set it up that I don't think works all that well? Well, for starters, your first sword fights are on that narrow wall top during the game's opening, and they were incredibly easy. I was like, wow, they really made this more approachable. I could get into a groove with this. And then the combat tutorial with the wooden swords happens, and it felt intentionally very tough, almost like a forced fail, which is a particularly annoying trope in games when you think you're fighting and it intends you to fail. I honestly don't know if they wanted me to fail the fight or not. I'm assuming experienced Kingdom Come Deliverance players will probably have no problem with it, but for a new player, the tutorial didn't serve much purpose other than to frustrate me and make me feel clumsy and stupid. And they don't let you replay it. It's part of the story. You finish fighting and then you have to go on to the next thing. And the reason I say it felt like a forced fail is my first real fight out in the wild, well, it went rather well. There's just something about it, though, that doesn't feel great. It's very clunky. It's very slow. It's almost non-impactful as you land your hits and they land theirs. There's a sort of dance of blocking and combos and stamina, and it just doesn't combine into an experience that feels intuitive or enjoyable. It feels tedious, punishing, and oftentimes like I'm fighting with the controls more than the enemy. Some of that may be my inexperience, or just my general dislike of this kind of combat, but if they wanted to make the combat of this game more inviting or accessible to new or less experienced players, I would say that they have not achieved that. So be warned, if combat like this looks off-putting, or sluggish, or just unfun to you, you may want to steer clear, because it pretty much feels how it looks in the trailers and in the gameplay videos. I honestly found myself just wanting to talk my way out of every fight, not because that's what I wanted to do, but because I just really didn't want to get into any more fights. This is all sort of compounded by the way that it lets you save, which ultimately leads to my conclusion. The wealth of freedom in Kingdom Come Deliverance II should be praised from a technical standpoint. Allowing the player to have this much impact over their story and experience is honestly impressive, but for me it just leads to paralysis. My most recent play session lasted for about an hour and 45 minutes, and I achieved very little. Traversing the world, almost dying from just one fight, being given no really clear way to heal yourself other than bandages to stop the bleeding, and then having to, I guess, go sleep so my health comes back. You don't really have money or potions in the early part of the game. Even when you fast travel, you can get jumped by somebody and have to fight them. Trying to find my dog seemed like a simple enough side quest to start with, but it just led me back to a town and more convos, more twists and turns, and I had little to show for it. After 7 hours, I just feel like a battered, poor, helpless pauper, which is part of the game's journey. I get that. That's how you're supposed to feel in the beginning of this game. But it doesn't make for a runway of intoxication and that feeling of, oh, I can't wait to jump back in. Most play sessions ended with a sense of, well, I didn't achieve very much. That was kind of frustrating, and I was mostly glad to press the power button on the console. Even now, when I think about how fun it would be to go maybe investigate all those points of interest, get a little bit more coin or more gear and get stronger, maybe just talk to some more NPCs, I'm immediately met with a conflicted sense of dread. I'm going to have to spend a bunch of time making potions, I may get into a fight that doesn't go my way, I'm still not sure what the best way to heal my character is. They don't really seem to go through that other than to bandage and then find a place to sleep, which just creates another theme that I think is really giving me pause about diving back into this game. The game, or at least the early game, is just riddled with flat tires, and that made it tough for me to get into gear and get into a flow state of knowing what to do next or where to go. When I had dinner with my 9-year-old son last night, I was telling him about all the things that had happened to me in this game. I stole a horse, I got caught, I got killed by wolves, I was arrested because I snuck into some guy's house and I slept in his attic, I got into sword fights, and it all sounded like an exciting tale of an adventure and struggle that I had gone through as I told him about it. He thought it was rather entertaining how often I died and failed, and really, that's what this game offers, the freedom to craft your own journey and tell your own story. But as I said, all that freedom comes at a cost, and for me, the cost may be too steep to jump back in. But those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts below. As always, these videos typically roll over into a live stream, so you can come and discuss it with me. There'll be a card here next to me, and I usually put a pinned comment below as well. As always, if you like this kind of content, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe.